And welcome, a special welcome to Governor Mitt Romney. Thank you for being here in St. Louis and at Washington University. Washington University School of Law is celebrating its 150th anniversary, the 12th oldest law school continuing in operation in the United States. I'm really proud of Dean Nancy Stout for gathering us this afternoon for this special Assembly Series presentation. Governor Mitt Romney is a lawyer, businessman, former governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the 2012 Republican presidential candidate. We're especially excited to have Governor Romney with us because his presence highlights an important moment for two of our schools. Governor Romney has both a Juris Doctorate and the Master of Business Administration. Our John M. Olin School of Business is celebrating its 100th anniversary, and of course, as I mentioned, School of Law celebrating 150 years. And just earlier this week, on February 22nd, the university celebrated the 164th anniversary of the founding. As I mentioned, Washington University School of Law is the 12th oldest law school, having been founded in 1867. The school is among the top 20 schools in the United States. Throughout our history, Washington University has fostered the vigorous and open exchange of diverse ideas and perspectives. Today, we remain committed to that proud heritage. As I shared with Governor Romney as we walked over, many important presentations have been made here. And Governor, it is a real privilege to have you here at Washington University and speaking at Graham Chapel. Our program today has been organized by Dean Nancy Stout. She is a great academic leader, and we will have important contributions from Vice Provost Adrian Davis and Professor Adam Rosenzweig. Now, to introduce the Governor, it's my pleasure to introduce Dean Nancy Stout.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chancellor Wrighton, for your thoughtful introduction. It is truly wonderful that both the business school and the law school are celebrating milestone anniversaries this year, and we are so lucky to have Governor Mitt Romney here on campus during our celebration year. Welcome, Governor Romney, to our campus and to our community. Now, to say that Mitt Romney has lived his life to the fullest would be an understatement. Throughout his life and his career, Governor Romney has been a leader in his church, in politics, and in business, all while showing an extraordinary commitment to his family. As a young man, Governor Romney lived in France as a missionary, and he is still fluent in French today. We confirmed that over lunch. He spent decades of his career as a successful businessman. He later addressed the financial issues of the Salt Lake City Olympics, thereby ensuring the success of those games. And he has devoted enormous time and energy to his various roles serving our nation. Governor Romney first ran for the United States Senate against Ted Kennedy. He was later a successful governor of Massachusetts, where, as a law dean, I expect and hope that you put your great legal training to work. And in 2012, he was the Republican nominee for President of the United States. Perhaps, and many hope, Governor, that you might come full circle and run for a political office again sometime soon. Governor Romney is a scholar and an academic. In addition to his JD and MBA from Harvard University, he has written 2 widely acclaimed books, and he has 9 honorary degrees from colleges and universities across the nation. His work, his ideas, his leadership, and virtually every aspect of his life have been reviewed, analyzed, applauded, and critiqued by news organizations around the world and in social media. But like any truly great leader, Mitt Romney continues to engage on the most important issues of the day. And he does so on the theory that our great nation thrives and advances through hard work, open dialogue, and honest debate. And we hope to have such dialogue and debate here today in Graham Chapel. Governor Romney has noted and lived the reality that life can and will take unexpected twists and turns. He has also shown that we may not be able to forecast and predict our future, but we should join in and take opportunities as they arise. And sometimes this means taking a few personal risks along the way. Thank you for all that you have done for our country, Governor Romney. I will say this, though. He did wonder if there was going to be something like the Oscars today, where maybe he wasn't the one that we were expecting to win the podium. In a moment, Governor Romney will come to the podium and make a few remarks. Then he will take his seat, and our two wonderful law professors, Vice Provost and Law Professor Adrian Davis and Vice Dean and Law Professor Adam Rosenzweig, will pose a few questions. After that time, I will invite you, the audience, to ask the governor questions. And we are particularly looking forward to hearing from questions from our WashU law students and students in general and our community in general. At the end of the fireside chat, please join all of us back at the law school for a dessert reception and a chance to get a selfie with our special guest. Let me now turn to our guest of honor, Governor Mitt Romney. Welcome to Washington University.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Stout and Chancellor. It's good to be here with you and to see so many students here today. I appreciate the chance to speak with you, and I'm thinking about what I was considering when I was sitting where you are sitting, figuratively, looking ahead at my life. There were books I read that suggested that if you have a very clear idea where you want to go and pursue that path with precision, that you're more likely to be successful than if you just randomly choose opportunities as they come along. Well, if that were the pathway to success, I didn't follow it. Nothing worked the way I thought it would. I expected that I was going to go work for a big company and try and work my way up to the top. Never happened. I instead followed a course of life where opportunities presented themselves, and that made all the difference for me. The biggest departure after I got in business for a number of years was going off and running the Olympic Winter Games in 2002. I say that's a big departure because I was not a great athlete. I actually have 5 sons, and we have every summer something we call the Romney Olympics, where we compete in various sporting events. I always come in 6th out of the 5, and them and myself. And so when they saw in the paper the announcement that I had taken the job to run the Olympics, my oldest son called and he said, "Dad, I've talked to the brothers this morning on the phone. We want you to know there's not a circumstance we could have conceived of that would put you on the front page of the sports section." But I was there. Now, you know that I took another departure by running for President of the United States, and it didn't work out exactly the way I'd hoped. I remember a wonderful line Fritz Mondale expressed after being beaten by Ronald Reagan. He said, "All my life I've wanted to run for president in the worst way, and that's just what I did." Now, I don't define myself by the losses, but by the bases attempted. I aspired, and though I achieved not, I was satisfied. I've learned a lot by my life experience, particularly in politics. I mean, running for president is extraordinary. You get a chance to meet the American people across the country and understand what it is that makes us such a unique and powerful country. The greatness of America is not just our scale and our economic might and our military might. It is also our goodness. To be great requires not just strength, but goodness. And I have seen the heart of the American people. We have given to others around the world, hoping to provide for them an opportunity for freedom. We're generous in our resources to help the poor and to lift them out of their circumstance. This is a nation that is great and good. I had the chance to see entrepreneurs who came up with new business ideas I never could have thought of. I saw workers who faced difficult times, who dug deep and worked hard and made their life better for themselves and their families despite extraordinarily difficult circumstances. I come away far more optimistic about America. But these are extraordinary, challenging times, too. We're going through a kind of tumult economically that I don't think we've faced, well, probably ever, but the closest parallel would be back in the turn of the century from the 1800s to the 1900s when we went into the industrial age and people began moving into cities. You're seeing an explosion in technology unlike anything we've known, and it will result, and it already has, result in a whole change in the way people live their lives and where they live and the kind of opportunities they might find. I'm convinced this next century will be an American century. And I say that because in an environment where innovation is going to be key to the success of a nation and its people, America is poised to lead. We are an innovative nation. Perhaps it's in our DNA. Almost all of us or our ancestors who came here came for opportunity. Perhaps that's part of it. Perhaps it's our educational institutions. We value creativity and innovation in the work and the way we teach our coming generations. Perhaps our legal system, offering bankruptcy, for instance, so that people who take big risks and fail don't go to jail like they used to back in England years ago, but instead are given a chance to start again. We celebrate people who make the attempt, even if it's not successful. Our legal system also includes the rule of law, the predictability that allows people to take risks. But for whatever reason, we are an innovative people. And in a century where innovation is going to be key, this nation is poised to lead. I'd also note that the demographics of America are pretty beneficent. You see, unlike almost every other developed nation in the world, the baby boom generation in America had children, a lot of kids, Generation Y. In other parts of the world, developed world, the baby boom generation did not tend to have children. And so their, if you will, their demographic pyramid, where the oldest are at the top, and then there are a few more in the middle ages, and then you get down to the younger ages, the Generation Y, where you are, and instead of having a pyramid shape, they actually invert. And it's those younger people that are starting out, that are getting apartments and cars and borrowing, they fuel the economy. We have that in our nation. Other Western nations do not. And so there are a number of things that suggest America is going to have a very bright and powerful future if Washington doesn't mess things up in the interim. And it's kind of uncertain as to what's going to happen. And that's why, in my view, it's so critical that you look with a critical and careful eye at what's happening around you and ask the kind of questions of yourself and of others to say, what do we have to do to make sure that we remain the leader of the world? A nation that's not just strong and powerful, but a nation that's good. Because I'm convinced that goodness is essential to greatness. And I look to you and the heart of the people of America and the Generation Y, the people that are coming to fill the places that those of us that are older will step aside and leave empty. I'm looking to you to be able to make those changes and make those choices that will keep America the hope of the earth. God bless you all, and look forward to your questions today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor Romney. We now move to the fireside chat portion of our event. And Vice Dean and Law Professor Adam Rosenzweig, I know you have a question, and so why don't you start us in the conversation?
Great, and thank you. And thank you so much for your remarks and for giving me this opportunity. It's a real privilege to be up here with you. During the most recent presidential campaign, you were often a vocal critic of Donald Trump. But soon after the election, you met with the president-elect and offered him your support. Other public figures, such as Newt Gingrich and others, were sometimes critical of you in this respect. What do you see as the proper role of public figures such as yourself in helping to unify not only political parties, but also the nation after contentious national elections?
Well, follow up with your question, because there are a couple of things I'd mention there. One is the concerns I had about Donald Trump related to character and temperament, and with regards to policy, they were less focused on economic domestic policy and more focused on foreign policy. because a number of the things he had said during the campaign were difficult to interpret about what our role would be in the world, how he would position America against the totalitarians, against dictators. Putin, I would put in that category. And so I felt that if I had the opportunity to become Secretary of State and to help shape that policy and hopefully influence the person who now became president, who was president, that I would take that opportunity willingly, not so much to support him, but to support the country, right. and to have a voice that, well, I have a lot of confidence in myself, and I wanted to be able to have my voice heard if he was willing to listen to it. And he went a different direction. I have a great deal of respect for the people he's chosen around him in this regard. The new National Security Advisor, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. I don't know these people personally, but what I've read about them is encouraging. But I do believe that particularly at a time, if you have concerns about an individual that give you a real pause about where they might lead the country or lead a state or lead a city, that becoming involved with them and trying to shape that policy is the right way to go. Is there a follow-up on that I didn't get to?
And it's just to what extent is there obligation on public figures to help unify the country after national elections?
The last two presidents, President Trump and President Obama, have both spoken during the campaign about wanting to unify the country. And very little has been done by either one to unify the country. A lot of you were, I'm sure, supporters of President Obama. I think he's a fine person. But he spent much of his presidential capital attacking people on the other side of the aisle and campaigning for the things he believed in, but at the same time jettisoning the views and the relationships he could have had with people on the other side of the aisle. And President Trump to date has not delivered on the unification message that he spoke about during the campaign. And I think it's desperately needed. America is becoming more and more polarized, more and more divided. Part of that is a feature of the fact that if you're conservative, you tend to watch Fox News, and if you're more liberal, you watch MSNBC. I'm obviously, being a little more extreme than you might be, but as a result, people don't even get the same facts anymore. All right, you hear one set of facts on one network, you hear another set of facts on the other. How do you reach common ground when you don't even know the basis of what's going on? And so we're becoming more and more divided. And I don't see how we're able to be successful as a nation and maintain the goodness that has made us the shining city on a hill if we can't come together. And the only way I see us coming together is through the leadership of the person at the top. We can in our homes, in our communities, reach across the divide and create more harmony and unity. But ultimately, we depend on the person who we elect as our leader to show not only are they close to the people who voted for them, but they care just as much for the people who didn't vote for them. And that's something I think we very badly need as a nation.
Vice Provost Davis.
Governor, thank you for your career of service, and thank you for coming to be here with us today. My question kind of picks up on what you were just saying. The Civil War was over a century and a half ago, and yet our country feels still deeply divided along not only racial lines, but also lines of gender, sexual orientation, and increasingly, of course, religion. What do you think the future of equality is in the United States? Is a heterogeneous, pluralistic democracy possible? And if so, what are the preconditions? Or is there a fundamental tension between equality and liberty in our country?
Well, I think there's a real debate right now about the role of liberty to begin with, and the need for us to have the ability for people to express their views regardless of the point of view they have. I happen to think that the media plays an extraordinarily important role in our society. and that an open and free media is welcome and applauded, even though they make mistakes. And by the way, they're more liberally biased than I would like them to be. At least that's my view. But I value the idea of editors. I like there being, big newspapers and networks where someone can look at it and say, what's your source? Let me find out where you got that information, and let's check it a couple of times. There'll be mistakes made, but I value very highly the institutions of liberty. We've seen other nations reach for democracy and fail in the attempt to do so, to become a liberal democracy, in part because they didn't have the institutions in place to support and to be a foundation for liberty. We have those, and I believe it's absolutely critical that we maintain those and we celebrate those. We attack the mistakes, but we don't attack the institutions. Now, the idea of equality is something which we celebrate in America, but I think we sometimes we look beyond what is realistic in our own society. So we say, well, maybe there's not equality, but there's equality of opportunity. Well, is that really true? I mean, if you're born Eric Trump or Mitt Romney for that matter, do you only have equal opportunity with someone who's born in an impoverished setting with a single parent? No. I had far greater opportunity being born of parents that were educated and well off and sent me to private school and a great university. I mean, so I had unequal and favored opportunity. And so I think we have to be honest that there's going to be, and there still is in our society, great differences in terms of opportunity. And yet one of the great objectives of a successful society is to create as much equality and opportunity as you possibly can, and to give everyone the chance to achieve their hopes and dreams. And I think that's essential for the future success of America as a nation. And by the way, I happen to think that America plays an extraordinary role in the world. In my view, there are four major competitors for leadership in the world. And which of these becomes the leader of the world and becomes the model for the world will determine whether or not billions of people are able to enjoy freedom and relative prosperity. Ours is one model, the model of the West, and where the United States leads, and that is based upon two fundamental principles, which is personal liberty and economic liberty. We have free enterprise and a free society. And those two pillars have propelled America to be the most powerful nation in the history of the earth, and this model to be the lead over the last 70 years on the planet. Then there's the Chinese approach. They're another model. Their view is, economic opportunity, free enterprise. That works a lot better than socialism or communism. They figured that out. They've adopted capitalism, cowboy capitalism in some ways, but they've adopted that, and it makes them far more economically powerful than they've ever been before. But they marry that not with personal liberty, but with authoritarianism. And then you have the Russian model, a bit like China, which has again adopted a form of free enterprise, although it's more crony capitalism, where if you know politicians, then you have the opportunity to become an oligarch and make a fortune. And so it's a crony capitalism. At the same time, they don't marry that with freedom either. They marry it with authoritarianism. Then the fourth model, of course, are the jihadists, the radical, violent jihadists. And their model, of course, is also based on authoritarianism. Only one of the four competitors to lead the world over the coming centuries is based upon personal freedom. Ours. It is absolutely essential that America, in my view, continue to lead the world. That we have the economic and military and moral strength and goodness in our core such that the world will emulate us and we can lead the world instead of following the Chinese or the Russian or the jihadist example. Freedom itself is in the balance. It's such a critical time to be able to be in this country. You're in this time. if you get the chance to run for president, do it. It's a great experience. And or run for city council, or get on the school board, or run for state rep. I mean, make public service part of something you look at. If the window opens, jump through. It may never. You may find your life entirely involved in the private sector. Fine. Or in another avenue of the public sector, or teaching or medicine. Fine. That's great too, because all these things are needed. But always keep an eye open to see if you're needed to serve, because providing greater opportunity for all of our citizens and ensuring that the institutions that are the foundation of freedom and democracy, that those are strong, is essential in a world where we're deciding what the future will hold. Thank you.
So, Governor, you commented that you see the nation as a divided nation right now, and then you listed 4 different models of literally running a country. So is your advice to all of us to address those issues, to be more participatory in governance, or is there something more that you think we can do? We're a learning community. We're always trying to do better and be better.
As I mentioned earlier on with my Olympic experience, it's very hard in my view to forecast exactly what you're going to do in your life. And I remember my dad ran for governor. He'd been head of a car company. He didn't have a college degree. Never had a college degree. Never could put the money and time together to get a college degree. He was born in Mexico, lived poor for the first years of his life, ultimately worked his way up to become head of a big car company in Detroit, and feeling that the state he was in real trouble, decided he would run for governor, and won, and was reelected, was a 3-term governor of his state. I might have thought about politics given that history, but he said to me, Mitt, don't ever get into politics unless, he should have stopped there. But he said, unless, number one, you're independent financially, and he said, because you don't want to have to win elections to pay your mortgage, because that will tempt you to say and do things that you don't believe. And number two, don't get involved in politics if your kids are young and they're going to get their head turned by whether their dad is a winner or a loser in an election. And I never imagined I'd be financially independent, or that my kids would ever be raised. I had 5 of them. And I was working at a consulting firm. I thought I was going to go work for a big company, by the way. And I went to work at Chrysler one summer. I'd been in law school 1 year. I went to Chrysler for the summer. It was so bureaucratic. I thought, boy, there's no way I could work here. I mean, it's impossible. I couldn't live in this environment. And so even though I thought that's what I was going to do, I came back and got offered a job with the Boston Consulting Group, and took that job and worked in consulting. And I absolutely loved that experience, and got the chance to come out here a good deal, by the way, working for Monsanto. I saw the CEO of Monsanto just a moment ago, Dick Mahoney, and renewed old friendships. It was a great learning experience, but it's not something that I had anticipated would happen in my life. And then from there, my boss said to me, do you want to start a venture capital and private equity firm? And I said, boy, that sounds great. I'd love to do that. And I'm not sure we'll be successful at it. I'd never invested my money. When I was out trying to raise money, one of the guys said to me, how have you done with your own investments? I said, well, not very good, actually. I haven't done very well. He didn't give us any money to invest. But it turned out that taking the technology of our consulting firm and applying it to investments worked pretty darn well. And of course, it probably didn't hurt that the stock market went from about 1,000 to 10,000 in the years I was at Bain Capital. And so for some inexplicable reasons, I became financially independent. My kids were now raised, and the window opened. In my state of Massachusetts, the Republican governor had a 13% approval rating. And the head of the local Republican Party said to me, Mitt, would you consider coming back from the Olympics and running for governor? And the window was open. I felt there was a great need. There were several things I wanted to do. I decided to run. And that was an extraordinary departure from the life that I'd expected. I tell you that whole story because you don't know what will happen in your life. Keep your eyes open to the public sector and see whether there's a place where you can play a meaningful role. For most of you, that will not make sense. The window won't open. You won't have something you desperately want to do in the public sector. And you will instead be involved in another avenue, the private sector perhaps. And recognize, for someone in the public sector to spend money to help the poor or the aged or young people, to spend that dollar only has value if it represents a good or service produced in the private sector. The private sector is essential to a successful and good nation. And so your work in the private sector is doing good. I mean, don't think of it as being, we're all the bad guys and the people in government are good. No. The people in government can't do anything unless the private sector is highly successful and thriving. Do your job well and give it your energy and your all. And you will be serving the nation, and I believe opening avenues of hope and opportunity for others. I can offer you a little advice, though, which is unsolicited, I know. But the greatest, without question, how do I describe this? The greatest source of happiness and joy in my life by far is my relationship with my wife and with my children and now grandchildren. Everything else is a far, far distant competitor. There's no question, but your relationship with another human being is the single most important decision you will make. And then, if you're lucky enough to have children, I remember the Bible, I think it's, which book is it in? It says, children are a heritage of the Lord. Happy is he who hath his quiver full of them. All right? Children are a great blessing. And so in your pursuit of how to help the country, in your community, and how to thrive in your private sector, don't forget that the source of the greatest joy you will ever experience will be in your relationship with another human being through the bonds of marriage and ultimately with your children.
Thank you. Speaking of religion, Adrian, I think you have thought about these issues quite a bit, and perhaps you'd like to follow up with a question exactly on that topic.
Absolutely, thank you. In 2007, you offered a powerful statement on the role of religion in the United States. You said, the diversity of our cultural expression and the vibrancy of our religious dialogue has kept America in the forefront of civilized nations, even as others regard religious freedom as something to be destroyed. More recently, in a speech at Trine University, you stated, demagogues on the right and the left draw upon our darker angels, scapegoating immigrants and Muslims or bankers and business people. How do you feel about the state of cultural diversity and religious liberty in the U.S. today?
I'm concerned about the growing trend in America and across the world of populism, if you will. And one of the characteristics of populism is to find a scapegoat, to find someone that you can blame the failed expectations upon. And on the right, that tends to be blaming it on immigrants and foreign goods and foreign competitors, if you will, foreigners. And on the left, it tends to be blaming on the rich and the bankers and so forth. But it's blame. And you don't become great and good by blaming. And you're seeing that across the world, an anger and a passion about finding scapegoats. I have been particularly troubled recently seeing the anti-Semitic acts that have been going on in our country. Where this comes from is troubling and frightening, and is so antithetical to providing the happiness and freedom and prosperity to the people of our country and to people around the world. And you wonder what it is when a country gets in trouble, when a civilization gets in trouble. What has to happen for it to turn around? And some of you are probably students of history. Rome was in trouble, and then came three great emperors and helped turn Rome around. Great Britain was in trouble during the Second World War, and one person, Winston Churchill, was able to make an enormous difference, and, if you will, rally the people of the world. to stop Hitler. I happen to think that one person can make an enormous difference. And we need that in the leadership of our nation. We need that in our leadership of our institutions and our homes. The only other alternative I've seen in history that's worked besides a great leader is a crisis. A crisis so severe it shakes up the population to do what's right. The problem is sometimes the crisis is so severe it kills the enterprise. And so you don't hope for those crises. But I happen to think that given the challenges the world is seeing right now, we are in desperate need of great leaders. And they can be in our homes and in our schools, our churches, and in our various institutions. But certainly in the leadership positions of our country, we desperately need people who will not fall prey to the demagoguery on the left or the right that so bankrupts the moral character of a great people.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. When we think about the political hurdles that exist to running for office, there are many. Perhaps, Adam, you'd like to weigh in on exactly that topic. I know you're thinking about that too. Sure.
Yeah, so on a slightly different note, so given the experiences, especially in this past election, but also in 1992 and in 2000, among others, and you mentioned before how important institutions are in a society. Do you think it's time, the time has come for electoral college reform? And if so, how do you think that might impact different states? I know you're familiar with smaller electoral states as Utah, mid-sized states as Massachusetts, but also large states like Texas and California.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk lately about going to a popular vote system and just adding up the total votes to decide who should become president. And particularly in a year where your candidate might have won the popular vote and not the electoral vote, you find that very compelling. And so I'm not an expert on this. We probably have some political scientists who could take us through the thinking on this, but I happen to still believe that an electoral college system makes sense. Now, why do I say that? Well, a couple of reasons. I'll mention just a simple one to begin with. What would happen if we got down to a popular vote that was almost evenly divided? I mean, 0.25% difference between two candidates. It's very possible that would happen. Are we going to have a nationwide recount? How in the world would you have a nationwide recount? I mean, you can have a state recount where all the lawyers from both parties all go down there and spend weeks looking through, if you will, ballot chads and so forth to try and see who won or who did not. And you have local courts decide which votes count, which do not, because right now states make those decisions. And that's something which is theoretically possible, or is actually demonstrably possible. But having a nationwide recount and the opportunity for fraud and abuse would just be unimaginable, in my view, and unthinkable. So that's one big problem, in my view, with just saying we're going to add up all the votes for the whole country. Another point is this, and that is when you run for office, there are a few states that you concentrate on, which you think are going to be the swing states. And the people in those states really get to know the candidates well. They see them time and time again. And so so-called retail politics, meaning shaking hands, going to coffee klatches, going to the Rotary Club, speaking at colleges and universities, that actually works. It makes a difference because you know those states are going to have a huge influence. Places like Iowa and New Hampshire, for instance, the first in the primary process. Those people, I mean, there's an old joke about, I think it was again Fritz Mondale was saying to someone in New Hampshire, you know, can I count on your vote? And he said, well, I've only shaken your hand 6 times, so I haven't decided yet. These people really get to know you. But if a campaign is going to be nationwide, not electoral college state by state, then candidates have no incentive to really get to know the people of a state, nor the people of the state to really get to know them on a retail basis. Everything will be media, everything will be paid ads, and it'll be like a beer commercial day in and day out. And I actually think that the role of retail politics, where some group of citizens in our nation really get to know the candidates and meet them personally, that's a valuable part of our system. So for those two reasons, among others, I think it makes sense for us to maintain the electoral system. And somehow, the amazing thing to me is how brilliant our founders were. The longer I live and the more experience I have, the more I happen to believe that our founders were inspired to find a system which has worked so remarkably well.
Oh, that is great. We'd now like to hear from the students and the community, and I admit I'm a little confounded on how these questions are going to be posed. Is there a microphone that...
Well, we have a hurricane at least. You're going to take a microphone away from that gentleman.
And give it to...
No more tough questions from him. So if you'd like to ask a question, come on down to the center aisle, yes. and you're going to be the microphone holder.
Wonderful. Okay.
Oh, the guys in the back are making a strong move to the front here.
Exactly.
So, Governor Romney, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So at issue in your final presidential debate was a statement you made correctly identifying Russia as our greatest geopolitical foe. In your book, No Apology, you identified that Russia pursues a strategy of authoritarianism based on energy and crony capitalism. Given the renewed importance Russia has in our political discourse, how do you think we as a country should deal with Russia? And are our strategies compatible in the long term? Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's no question. And frankly, I believe that President Obama and the liberal media that attacked me for my comment, they agreed. They just had to find some way to attack the Republican. Of course, Russia is our number one geopolitical adversary. Doesn't mean it, I was asked, by the way, are they our greatest threat? I said, no, a nuclear Iran is our greatest threat. But in terms of politics, lining up, Russia is the greatest geopolitical adversary. And that's clear because they support the world's worst actors. They're very aggressive in trying to promote the propaganda that moves people towards authoritarianism. And they also, by the way, as we now know, have invaded two nations, Georgia, Ukraine, and I believe they have intent, ultimately, to invade others. I think they're trying to reestablish the Russian Empire. Russia wants to return to the days where they are one of the great powers of the earth, if not the great power of the earth. And in a setting like that, I think Russians respond best to a circumstance where they understand where America will stand and they see America as a strong entity. Look, over the last 70 years, we have had a foreign policy which says America is going to be involved in the world promoting our values. America will be strong militarily and economically. And third, we will be strong by virtue of linking arms with our friends and allies around the world. You want to be a friend of America. And that foreign policy has led to a setting over 70 years where nations recognize that just because they're stronger than their neighbor doesn't mean you can invade your neighbor. And the reason George Herbert Walker Bush went into Kuwait was to say, I'm sorry, Saddam Hussein, just because you're stronger than Kuwait doesn't mean you get to invade Kuwait. That is not the system in the world where America is a leader and where NATO comes together to defend the sovereignty of small and large nations. If we instead move to a setting where we say, you know what, might makes right. And if you want to invade your neighbor, or you want the South China Sea, or you want to go into the Baltics, hey, if you're stronger than Lithuania and Latvia, go ahead. That's a very frightening world. That is a world in disorder, and that disorder will spread across the planet. That's what Harry Truman and Dean Acheson saw when Dean Acheson said, President at the creation. They came up with the foreign policy that's defined America for the last 70 years, which I've just described, where we will stand for the sovereignty of individual nations. And I think it's critical that our president and the leaders of our foreign policy world make it very, very clear. That continues to be the foreign policy of America. We link arms with our allies. We will be strong militarily, economically, and in our moral goodness. And we will defend the rights of people to pursue their own course and determine their own destiny. I hope that's what happens. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Hi. Would you tell me your name, too? It'll probably turn on. You don't need to press any button. They got someone that's got a machine somewhere. And if it doesn't work, here comes the handheld microphone again. It's not working. I'll repeat the question. I can hear you, but I'll repeat it to the people who can't.
So you mentioned the importance of business in the private sector, and you mentioned the importance of being respectful and reaching across the aisle. So my question is kind of regarding Sean Spicer made a comment on Thursday that the administration is going to kind of aggressively enforce federal marijuana laws, even on states that have chosen to legalize recreational marijuana. And my question to you, especially as a governor of a state who's recently chosen to legalize recreational marijuana, is how do you square that policy with the Republican tradition of respecting state rights, with small federal government, with deregulation? And do you think that should even be the policy of the Republican Party, or what should the policy be?
Yeah, it's hard for me to repeat the whole question, obviously. But her point is, how do you square Republicans who believe in states' rights and individual choice, who are voting for recreational use of marijuana, with the administration recently announcing that they're going to potentially pursue a national policy which has marijuana is illegal? In my view, the way you square it is very simple, which is we're a nation of laws. We have a national law that says marijuana is illegal, and I believe we should enforce that law or change it. And if the people of America, through their elected representatives, want to change the law and say this should be a state-by-state decision, then they should do so. But I don't think, I happen to think that the Obama administration was wrong in saying, you know what, we're not going to enforce the law. I mean, that is not the way I think our system was intended, which is we pass laws, Congress passes them, the president either vetoes or signs the law, it becomes the law of the land, then the executive branch is to execute the law. And if, as long as it's constitutional, and if the people decide that that's not where they want to go anymore, then we change that law. And it would be very possible that a Congress would say, we're going to let this be up to the states. Now, my own view is that this is something which should be done at the federal level. The federal level should make a decision as to what we believe about marijuana. I won't get into how I would vote on that issue myself, but I can tell you that's how I square the administration saying we're going to execute the law. I think when President Obama, for instance, said we're not going to execute immigration law, you know what that does? It makes people angry. It makes them furious, and they can't count on the rule of law. And then they respond by reacting, reactionary, if you will, following the law, and then changing the law where it needs to be changed, in my view, is by far the best long-term solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here comes the microphone. Hi. What's your name?
Michael Lee, third-year law student. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You spoke a little bit about the differences in the population among our country, in politics, how it's growing more polarized. You've spoken a lot about innovation as well, but more in the context of the economic marketplace. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on how or whether government should address, through policy, directly or indirectly, the growing divide in our nation between, say, the rural population and the urban population, progressives and conservatives, that divide being, I think, natural, and the preferences of each group being legitimate. Is it proper for government to involve itself in facilitating interaction so that we can secure the society we say we are?
You know, I think that's one of the quintessential responsibilities of government, which is to say, how do we make sure and provide the greatest opportunity of prosperity and hope for all of our people, and not ignoring any minority or any majority, but instead looking across the entire nation and saying, what are the right policies for each of the people in our society? One of the challenges that we're having through the innovation cycle that we're seeing, which is going to blow our minds, I think, over the coming 20, 30 years, is that there's going to be extraordinary dislocation. And people who've counted on a certain type of employment are going to find that employment is gone. And that's a real problem. that creates great anger and not just anger. It's unfair. It creates poverty and unhappiness, and that's something which I think we as a nation poorly understood and acted to prevent when the world became global. When the global marketplace meant products from China and Mexico and Vietnam and Japan and so forth, we recognized that trade and open borders are ultimately economically a good thing, but they are not evenly, the pain of that change is not evenly distributed. And yet we didn't act to counter the pain that would be associated with that kind of change. I don't think you can turn back the clock, but we're now going into a new phase where technology is going to change the world, and we're going to have to change our systems so that people don't worry that they're going to be on the street or without health care or without education by virtue of those dislocations. So I think that's a very critical part of the role of government. Thank you.
Hi, Governor Romney. Thank you for being here. My name is Mark, and I'm actually from East Lansing. I drive by our childhood church all the time. So it's nice to see another Mid-Michigan guy.
Thank you.
So my question for you is, well, I'm the president of the Pro-Life Club here at WashU.
Which club?
The Pro-Life Club.
Yes.
And so I imagine that you have envisioned and hoped for a pro-life America as much as I have. My question is, how do you foresee that happening? Legally, politically, and culturally?
I think the issue of life and choice, abortion, if you will, is an issue which will be decided by the American people, and the elected officials will follow the mood of the people. And therefore, if you see people very strongly on one side or the other of that issue, that's what the elected officials will, that's where they will take us. I don't think you're going to see one side or the other on that issue impose its will on the entire nation. I think you're going to find with President Trump that his new nominee to the Supreme Court and potentially other nominee or nominees down the road will be more open to making changes that would return the issue of abortion to the states. If that were the case, it will become a state-by-state decision. I think it's very difficult to predict what the mood of the people will be on that topic, but I do believe that the preferred course in dealing with social issues is convincing one's fellow men of the correctness and the morality of your point of view, as opposed to trying to enforce your point of view on others, whether you're coming from the left or the right. Thanks.
Hi, Governor Romney. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Sam Klein. I'm a junior here at WashU. I'm from Bethesda, Maryland, just outside D.C. I was wondering, you were touching earlier on the idea of, in our system, how the government, the public sector, and the private sector are codependent to create and promote prosperity for everyone and to kind of increase the overall welfare of our country. Now, the president said, I don't know if it was facetious or not, sometimes hard to tell, that for every regulation we want to add, we have to cut 2 of them. And in my view, regulation is one of the key ways that the government checks the private sector. And I was wondering, as someone with extensive experience in both the public and the private sector, if you could elaborate on that sort of relationship, that codependence, and how, in particular, the private sector can ease the burden and bring our country forward from the bottom up.
Yeah, and let me describe a learning experience for me as a governor of my state in Massachusetts. I went to the ribbon cutting of a biotech facility for one of America's largest biotech firms in my state. And after the event and the photos were taken, the chief executive officer was kind enough to come to my office. We sat down and talked, and I said, boy, we're so happy to have you in our state. And he said, well, if we had to do it again, we'd never come here. And I said, oh, that's not nice to hear. Why do you say that? He said, well, 10 years ago when we announced this new facility, we thought it would take 2 or 3 years to be in the ground and to have our facility going. It took us 10 because of all the city burdens that were placed on us, and then the county regulations, and then the state had regulators and the federal regulators, everybody telling us how we had to build the building and who we had to hire and how many feet we had to be from the curb and how many of it. And he said it becomes so overwhelming that we frankly would have been a lot better off just going somewhere else. And there are nations like India, for instance, and I'm not a student of India, but what I read about India is you look at China and India, China growing like crazy. Lots of problems in China. I'm not looking at that as a model, but India, nowhere near the level of growth or prosperity for their people. And India is just overwhelmed with regulation. Starting a business in India is very, very difficult. And I think what a lot of people, myself included, have said is that we need to take a weed whacker, if you will, to the regulatory environment in our country and see if there are things we can't take out. What I did in my state was this. After this conversation I had with this pharmaceutical CEO, I went back and I said to our cities, I said, look, you've got to be able to say yes or no to any commercial development in your city within 1 year. And if your process takes longer than a year, then we're not going to send from the state any inquiries to your city for potential development. And we're going to allocate to you money so you can hire lawyers to change regulations to speed the process of getting regulatory approval. And there were most of the cities in my state signed up for that, as I recall. And we tried to speed the way to get to either yes or no. But what happens is there are a lot of bureaucrats in government who believe their job is dependent upon slowing things down and making sure that they're going to be around for years and they're just going to charge businesses a lot of money to keep going before they're able to build something. It's like, no, we want to get these businesses going. We want to create the jobs. By the way, the great mistake a conservative like me has is in a campaign is when I talk about business, making it easier for business to start. People think that all I care about is the rich business people. Hey, the rich business people are going to do fine under liberals or conservatives. They're going to do fine in China, Russia, or America. The people who get hurt by the policies, in my view, of liberalism, overregulation, and so forth, are the poor and the middle class. The reason I try and encourage the creation of businesses and make it easier to get a business started and innovation is because the only way I know to raise the wages of the middle class and the poor is by having there be so many businesses that are competing with one another to hire people that they have to raise the wages to get the people to go and join them. That's why I'm, quote, pro-business. Pro-business for me means finding ways to raise wages for the American worker. And that's something I didn't communicate well enough. And so the effort in regulation, I don't know how well it'll be done in administration. I'm not there. I don't know that I could do any better than anybody else would. But I do believe that the effort to say, how can we make it easier for a business to start and to hire people, the better. Obviously, at the same time, making sure people are safe, making sure there are not the kinds of abuses that led to the financial crisis that we all witnessed a few years ago. That regulation is essential, but it's got to be in the right balance. Yeah, thanks, Sam.
All right. Hi, Governor Romney. Thanks so much for coming out. I've enjoyed all your comments, and I think other people have as well. My name is Eli Scherzager. I'm also a junior here. And you mentioned earlier, that you think America's future is bright if Washington doesn't mess things up. I couldn't agree more. You also mentioned kind of foreign policy differences with President Trump. And I kind of wanted to ask you about something, and I'm going to look down at my phone so I make sure I get the details correct. But earlier this afternoon, I don't know if you saw this or not, President Trump announced a $54 billion increase in defense spending. And I know that you probably agree with the kind of effort to rebuild our military, as probably do many people here. However, along with that, he announced a kind of unspecified cut in foreign aid. It won't pay for much of the increase in their defense budget because foreign aid makes up such a small part of the U.S. budget, but it will pay for some of it. And I know you've discussed in the past kind of cuts to foreign aid during the 2012 presidential campaign. You had questions about that, but you said that you thought the best strategy moving forward was kind of to tie aid to opening up of economy in the government so that we could have more democratic and kind of more free market enterprises in other countries. And you also mentioned earlier kind of these four competing governmental institutions. And for someone like me who wants to see the American one move forward, and for many people on both the left and the right foreign aid plays an important role in ensuring that a lot of countries kind of get to see the American model and have the kind of capacity to try to implement that. So I kind of wanted to ask you what your thoughts now are. Obviously it's been a while since you made a lot of remarks on foreign aid, but what your thoughts are on foreign aid and kind of what recommendations you have to President Trump on foreign aid.
Foreign aid, in my view, is part of America communicating to the world the power of free enterprise and personal freedom. A lot of people in government don't think about competition. They don't recognize that America is competing. They don't recognize in state legislatures that they're competing with other states. I remember when I got elected governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger put up a billboard in my state showing him in a T-shirt flexing muscles and said, "Come to California." It's like, wait a second. You're stealing jobs from a fellow Republican. By the way, I put up a billboard in his state outside the airport. It showed me in a T-shirt. It said, "Smaller muscles but much lower taxes. Come to Massachusetts." All right? So we're competing, but the stakes are a lot higher. And there is a notion that somehow, because we're surrounded by water on two sides, that we don't have to worry about what happens in the world. But we do. Very bad things have happened in the world. And unless America is brilliant and vigilant and strong and good, bad things could happen again. And one of the ways we try and keep very bad things from happening is to use some of our very small amount of our resources to encourage truth and democracy and establish the institutions essential for freedom in other parts of the world. And how well we do that could be brilliant or could be really dumb. And I can't tell you nation by nation how well that's being done. But I do believe that we should continue to devote resources in foreign aid to communicate the power of our system of government and our system of freedom. Thank you.
Hi, Governor Romney. I'm Hannah Shanzer, and I am a sophomore environmental policy student. You talked earlier about wanting to ensure a prosperous future for future generations. You are one of a minority of Republicans that has publicly stated that climate change is happening. I was wondering how you feel that the private sector and the Republican Party, what they can do in the future during this administration that's the most anti-environmental administration in history to fight climate change and ensure that prosperous future that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, I happen to actually believe that there is climate change, and I think humans contribute to it in a substantial way. And therefore, I look with openness to all the ideas that might be able to address that. I think it's very difficult, generally, for the private sector to take the bold steps that you'd probably like to take. All the private sector people do the small things, all right? They put little placards up about they're doing this or doing that. They're turning off the lights at the end of the day in their headquarters, so that they're saving energy. I mean, that's fine, but the major steps, most corporations are afraid to do on their own because if their competitor doesn't, they're going to be at a disadvantage, lose money, lose jobs, maybe go out of business. So they don't want to do the really bold stuff unless everybody agrees to do it together. And most countries are afraid of the same thing. They don't want to put in place huge burdens on themselves when the other people don't play by the same rules. And so I happen to think that the best way to seriously address the emissions of greenhouse gases is for there to be international agreements. And obviously there has to be some stick for people to enter into those kinds of agreements. But I think we have to have those sticks, and that the nations that are the largest markets in the world, like ourselves and Europe and others, can say, hey, look, if you're not willing to make steps to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases or to encourage the more positive flow into our atmosphere, then there are going to be burdens placed on you. And we can think about lots of ways of doing that. People have talked about cap and trade or an import duty on products that come in that come from countries that don't follow those kinds of policies. I'm open to a lot of different ideas. Some I like better than others. But the idea of doing nothing, in my view, is a recipe for disaster. Recognize, by the way, that nations like China and India and Brazil and Indonesia are going to be far bigger emitters than the U.S. And so if we're going to be serious about global warming and emissions, we have to involve the developing nations. And that's a tough call to make as to how we're going to get that done. But I think it's going to require presidential leadership for that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nana Kamath. I'm a first-year law student at Washington University. Thank you for coming, first off.
Thank you.
Second off, I wanted to sort of ask about which way you think education is going in this country. I know that there is, you personally said you went to private school and you received a lot of opportunities. Do you think that the divide between private school students and public school students is causing a bigger divide in the political atmosphere of our country? And if so, how do you think it can be addressed?
I think there's a big divide in the quality of education opportunity in our country. The biggest divide is between our urban schools and suburban schools. And I'm not qualified to tell you how the rural schools are comparing, because my state had a very small rural community, and I don't want to forecast or project based upon my more limited experience, but I can tell you there are big differences in school districts. And the biggest single difference in the quality of education, based upon my own experience in my state and the studies I've read by people like McKinsey Institute that went around the world looking at school systems and looked in our own country, the biggest difference is not classroom size or even spending per pupil, but it is instead the academic accomplishment and capacity of the teacher. And the best institutions in the world, the best states and systems in the world, hire from the very best and brightest. And so Singapore and Finland and others say we're going to hire people that graduate in the top 5 or 10% of college classes to be our teachers. That means they have to pay them more to attract the top 5 or 10%, and they do. And so if we're going to be serious about really improving the quality of education in our public schools and bringing it up to the level of perhaps some of our best charter schools or our best private schools, then it means, in my view, focusing on hiring the very best and brightest among our teachers. And that'll probably cost some more money. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Jesse. I'm from Arlington, right across the street from your church, so that's really cool. But I just wanted
Arlington, Massachusetts?
Yeah, Arlington, Massachusetts.
Wow, that's my neighbor, right?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you for some advice for me. So we're here in Missouri. We're here in St. Louis, very Democratic, but you go 20 miles in any direction, you enter Republican zone, basically. I don't like to use the word hate, but I can say that I strongly dislike Donald Trump. So I'm wondering, what is your advice when I kind of go out? I honestly want to befriend people, but how do I start to breach that divide of someone who's staunchly for Trump, and I fundamentally disagree with Trump on so many ways, but I want to be friends with as many people as possible. How do you think I should relate to someone who's like staunchly pro-Trump? How do we start as a very democratic institution, kind of break that divide and just have a conversation with someone without, just have a conversation with someone who's staunchly pro-Trump, staunchly pro-democratic? How do you start bridging that divide?
Well, when you find out, let me know, will you?
Or how would you approach that?
I don't have an answer for that. I have some great friends that are liberal, and we would talk about issues and what we thought were the right things to do on various issues. And the remarkable thing was, on all but a very few issues, we could come to agreement. And I guess, I was talking to the dean about the fact that I happen to be driven by data, by facts, stubborn things. And so when I'm in a private conversation with somebody, we look for the data and see if we can resolve a difficult issue based on data. And by and large, we can come to agreement. Where we have difficulty ever coming to agreement are on social issues, for instance, where data isn't going to guide the answer. It's more of a personal, religious or moral choice. But the only thing I know is to have an honest discussion about issues, and see if we can keep it from getting too heated. I don't know where President Trump is going to go. I mean, I read, you got David Frum at the Atlantic, and he says he's trying to establish an authoritarian state. Then you read Frank Bruni at New York Times, and he says, no, he's a narcissist, and he's just going to do whatever yields the greatest praise. And then you have Charles Krauthammer and says, no, it may be, if you will, studied madness, which is you pretend that you're a little nuts, so that people around the world don't really know what you're going to do. But then you send out your not your minions, but you send out your team. You send out your team to calm people down, to tell them what's really going to go on. And then there are others that say President Trump's just getting his sea legs. He hasn't realized that every word he says is magnified in such an extraordinary way, and he's going to settle down. I don't know where we're going to be. It's only been a month or so that he's been president. Some of the things he said have been really offensive. Some of the things he's done have been very positive in my view. So, someone said the other day, I think it was Brett Baer, said it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. All right, and so don't dismiss the good, don't dismiss the ugly. I mean, but I believe we're going to see something settle down at some point. I don't know where it's going to settle, but I have high hopes because I believe in America, and I believe that he will ultimately be swayed by the people and the voice of the people of this country, and by the respected people that he's selected to be part of his cabinet. I sure hope so. Good luck in finding the answer to that question.
Hope to see you in Arlington.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alaric D'Souza. I'm a third-year MD PhD student here, and I would like to get your perspective on science's communication problem. So I've kind of noticed that smaller units of research that scientists publish usually don't involve too much controversy. Sometimes the audience that's intended for the research will even take the conclusions beyond what the scientists are attempting to say. However, some of the larger, more synthesized units of research that oftentimes have greater consensus among scientists have a lot more trouble being accepted broadly. And so I'd like to get your perspective on how scientists, after they synthesize research with a broad consensus, then convey that research in a way that will get broad acceptance.
Yeah, obviously I'm not an expert in that topic, and I have to recognize that this has long been an issue, and probably an even greater issue in the past than it is today. James A. Garfield was shot. This was, I think, 10 years after Lister told people about bacteria and not adding bacteria into wounds. And yet James A. Garfield was shot in the Penn Station, I believe, in Washington, D.C. Doctors rushed to his aid, stuck their fingers into the wound looking for the bullet, stuck a probe in there without washing it, without cleaning it, and he died of sepsis. He didn't die of a bullet wound. He died of the infection from all these doctors sticking their digits into his body. It's 10 years after Lister told us, and we had, years and years, our scientific community rejected the findings of Lister. Are we better today? I'm not sure we're a lot better. I guess the thing I would suggest is that people in the scientific community engage some of the individuals who are in the communications community and say, so for instance, we have convinced the world to spend a couple of bucks for a can called Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola, which is caramel water, and they buy it all over the world. It's unbelievable. We're able to convince them to do that. We are brilliant at convincing people to do certain things. And yet when it comes to some of the most important things, like the importance of liberty and freedom, and by the way, scientific fact, we don't tend to do so well. I think some of the people who market ideas and communicate ideas have extraordinary value in the scientific community, and I'd engage them. They're good at it. Yeah, thanks. Should we let these people go at some point?
Yes, we have a few more questions.
Okay, we get a few more questions. I don't want to keep you here all day. The sun is setting. Please.
Hi, Governor Mitt Romney. I'm Jeff Cernak. I'm from Philadelphia.
Hi,
I'm a
Jeff.
3L here. So my question is great for you because I'm a conservative and so are you. And as a young conservative, I feel a lot of remorse with the Republican Party. The identifying attribute being the Christian right and how much the Republicans kind of have to utilize that to even get a base. We're seeing that with Trump, who never really was a Christian throughout his life, but now is supporting a lot of Christian right policies. So my thought to you is there a way that we can get back to kind of a Lincoln-style Republican Party where people forget that we were actually champions of civil rights and a lot of great things? Do you think that's possible, and if so, how?
I think that if you have the White House defines your party in the minds of the people. And I don't know that a party is able to be defined differently than the president of their own party, meaning the president of the United States if he happens to be in your party. So at this point, I believe in the minds of the American people, the Republican Party is defined by Ronald Reagan. Excuse me, by Ronald Reagan. Where's the water? Where's the water? Give me a different envelope. By our current president, Donald Trump, than by Ronald Reagan or Abraham Lincoln or names of our past. And to some degree, our party is defined by leaders at the state level. And so you will have governors in various states that represent something very different. I think Paul Ryan, for instance, to a degree helps define the Republican Party in a way that's different than the president. But by and large, the party in the minds of most people is defined by who's elected as president. And so, in my view, if you have a different view for the direction you'd like to see the Republican Party head, then you're going to want to be working for someone who you think shares your points of view in the next presidential contest. And then look at local elections and so forth doing so. But I think it's very hard to say that someone else is going to do that, because there's no pulpit like the bully pulpit that the president has, and encouraging the president to adopt policies that are more consistent with the ones you believe in. That is something I think is very laudable, and I hope people that are around him are doing that very thing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Governor Romney. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Laurent Ganel. I'm a third-year graduate PhD student in the Department of Genetics. You mentioned earlier the importance of innovation in American prosperity going forward. Being a scientist, when I hear innovation, I actually hear science. There's growing concern in many of the circles that I run in about science being under attack, from attacks on immigrants, who are some of our biggest contributors to American innovation, to attacks on objective reality itself through alternative facts coming from the White House, and even more direct attacks on science through the censoring or attempted dismantling of the EPA. Do you think that we have reason to be worried? And if so, what do we do to right the ship, where we are comfortable as a country talking about science and objective facts in a way that drives innovation and policy?
Yeah, I think in America we always have to be vigilant and worry about any kinds of things that might strike at the roots of what makes America an effective engine of prosperity and greatness. So should we always be vigilant and worried? Yeah, I guess I'm always kind of nervous and watch with interest. I'm concerned at the anti-scientific attitude which sometimes pervades. I'm concerned about any immigration policy which strikes at the core of legal immigration. My party has strongly opposed illegal immigration, as I do. At the same time, I think my party and our nation are very wise to embrace legal immigration. Let me tell you an interesting fact that I think is a real fact, and that's this. And I have a presentation that I make when I give paid speeches that shows the top 25 high-tech companies in America. And the top 25 are by their market value, So Apple would be number one and so forth, Microsoft and so forth. So you take the top 25 by value companies in America, high-tech companies in America. 60% of them were founded by immigrants of the first or second generation. Welcoming immigrants, particularly those with skill and experience, degrees that we need in this country, is very, very smart. Because when Steve Jobs creates Apple, yes, it makes him extraordinarily rich, but it also makes the rest of us a lot richer too. And it creates jobs for many, millions of people. And so welcoming that kind of talent into this country is essential. And investing in real facts, in real science, is absolutely critical. I mean, think of the places where America leads the world. I mean, some of them have been associated with the investments of our nation in technology. So whether it's in the internet or whether it's in medical care or in the military, higher education, these are places where America leads the world, has traditionally. So I salute the point that you make, and again, I worry when there are attacks on basic institutions which are essential for freedom to prosper, and facts and science are some of those things which are essential for freedom to prosper. Thank you. Uh-oh, looks like you're getting cut off. I apologize.
We have so many questions, and I'm sorry we don't have time for all of them. So I actually thought we could just hear two questions simultaneously, and then you can just make some...
Oh, let her come back. She's coming to the front.
Yeah, there she is.
Hold on.
Okay.
Hey.
So we'll have the two people just ask your question, and then the governor will respond in...
to both.
Yes.
Okay. So those two get to ask a question. The rest of you guys, thank you for flying Alitalia.
Well, this should be an interesting mesh. Hello, my name is Taylor Jordan Brantley. I'm a senior from Louisville, Kentucky. And my question is, what do you make of President Trump's decision to defund, or his plans to defund, the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities?
Hi, Governor Romney. My name is Brigham Brillia, and I'm a third-year Master's of Business and Public Health student. I was wondering what you think the effect on healthcare will be if the current administration repeals the individual and employer mandate, especially given the fact that it was an essential part of the system that you set up in Massachusetts.
Yeah, great. Okay. First, I would like the humanities to be funded by private contributions and private donations. And I don't see a great role of having the government funding art and deciding what is good art and what is bad art. I know that that's going to make a lot of people unhappy with me. I'm an English major. I love art. I go to museums around the world when I get the chance. But I'm not wild about the idea of borrowing money from China to pay for our humanities effort. If somehow that would kill the humanities, then I've got a problem, and I'd have to correct and look at a different course. I don't think that relying on private contributions and donations would kill art, but if I'm wrong, I'm happy to reassess that. But I still think we ought to devote our government resources elsewhere. Healthcare. These are very closely connected. When a state like Massachusetts wants to insure all of its citizens, as I did, an individual mandate was essential, in my view, to be able to get everybody insured and to make sure that you didn't have free riders that were, by and large, not young people who said, hey, why should I buy insurance? I'm not sick. You got to have everybody in the system, or the only system you have is with sick people, and then the premiums go crazy. So the individual mandate was, in my view, the only way we could get everybody insured. When you're the federal government, you have another option. And that option, I think, is one that as I'm reading from the Republican House and Paul Ryan, is one to say, hey, look, we're going to give everybody a tax credit. Everybody's going to get, let's say, a $5,000 tax credit to buy insurance with. So if you don't want to buy insurance, that $5,000 is just gone. I mean, it's the government giving you $5,000. And so on that basis, you can expect almost everybody to be smart enough to take the $5,000 they're getting from the government, which, by the way, can only be used to buy insurance, health insurance. to use that money to buy insurance. So they get everybody in the system by doing that. How do they fund that? Well, the way they fund that is to say, gosh, if your company is giving you an insurance policy that's really costing $25,000 a year, and right now the company gets to deduct all $25,000, we're going to say, no, you can't deduct $25,000. You can only deduct $5,000. The same as the credit we're giving people. So we're going to take away the deductibility of some of these, they say, Cadillac plans, and that will save enough money to allow us to provide a tax credit so that everybody can buy their own insurance. That's the idea. That's another way of getting everybody in the system. But I do believe that for health insurance to work, everybody has to be in the system. You can't have outliers that say, I'm not going to get insurance until I get real sick. I mean, that just doesn't work. Logically, that can't work, and it hasn't worked. So we'll see what the Republican House and Senate and President can come up with. But there are some options, and I think Paul Ryan was right and President Trump was right in saying that the current Obamacare system is failing. Companies are pulling out of it. Premiums are going through the roof. Could it be fixed? Perhaps. But I think they're looking at something more bold than just a fix. I think they're looking at something like a tax credit system. You guys, you've been kind to sit here all this time. It's an honor to be with you. Very few people. I have 24 grandkids. They don't ask for my opinion ever. Your questions have been insightful, thoughtful. What you're doing matters. This really counts. And the reason I spend time on college campuses is because I believe that this is a critical time in world history and that freedom is in the balance. God bless you in doing what it takes to keep America the hope of the earth. Thanks so much. Good to be with you. Thank you.